Welcome back to Season 3 of Titans of Foodservice. So I'm your host, Nick Portillo, and here we are. Welcome you back. We're continuing the Across America in 50 Weeks tour, where I'm sitting down with one Titan of Foodservice from every single state in the country. And on this episode, I'm going to be shining the spotlight on Oregon. Now, I've done about 10 thus far with this Across America in 50 Weeks tour. So this is I think just about maybe 9th, 10th, something like that. And just incredible conversations that I've had along the way. I've been talking to presidents and CEOs and vice presidents, just some really interesting, cool people. And with that, if you're enjoying the channel, if you're enjoying this show, if you could leave me a 5-star review on whether you listen along on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that would really mean the world to me. And here's why. I want to get this show out to as many people in the food industry as possible. And when you go and leave a 5-star review, it just helps kind of spread that word. I want to help people who are within the industry thrive and become the best version of themselves. Or maybe there's people that are out there that are looking for a new industry. I think the food industry is a great place to be, and I want to help get that message out. Now, let's get back to Joe. So Joe, he is the current CEO of Oregon Fruit Products, and he's been there since 2022. Now, his career in food spans over 15 years, and he's got deep knowledge in things like marketing, P&L management, brand growth, and we're going to talk about that in the episode. And before coming to Oregon Fruit, he worked at Tillamook. And in his time there, he was the head of marketing. You know, they did a complete rebrand in his time there. And we're going to you have to listen along to get the complete details of how he did that and the success that he had there. So also in our conversation, Joe and I, we dive into his career progression. He's going to talk about some of the strategies for leading successful brands and the challenges and opportunities of innovating within the food industry. So we're going to talk, there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of brand growth. We talk a little finance, a little bit about what the daily life of a CEO of a food brand is like. So buckle up, it's going to be fun. But before I jump into that conversation with Joe, I wanted to take a quick, unique look at the food service scene in Oregon. So Oregon, it's a very beautiful state, known for its agriculture, no doubt. It's earned a reputation as a leader in sustainable and organic food. Portland, in particular, is famous for its eclectic, I love that word, eclectic food scene, from renowned fine dining spots like, I think I'm going to mess this up, but Le Pigeon and Ox, to its thriving food cart culture, which offers everything from artisanal ice cream to globally inspired street food. The state is also a hub for wine, with the Willamette Valley producing some of the country's finest Pinot Noir. Oregon's commitment to local sourcing, innovative flavors, and sustainability has made it a standout in the food service industry, contributing to a culture that values both quality and community. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Joe. All right. Hey, Joe, welcome to the Titans of Foodservice podcast. I appreciate you taking time to join me.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So tell me, so you're an Oregon Duck. So you're what's the colors? Green and yellow?
That's right. Yeah. Emerald.
All
I think
right.
emerald officially.
Emerald.
Yeah.
Were you born and raised in Oregon?
No, I'm from the Bay Area. I grew up in a town called Burlingame, right near the San Francisco airport, and then moved up here about 2008. And then obviously went to college up here too. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I went to Chapman, which is a small little private school here in Orange County, and we had a lot of Bay Area kids, and we had a lot of like Seattle, Portland, so a lot of Oregon, a lot of Washington kids that came down as well.
Yeah, it's popular. I know that school. My sister went there, and but I know a lot of kids from Portland go down there just to escape the rain.
Yeah, right. I know. You come down here, it's sunny all the time. It's much different. When it's raining out for me, I'm always like, oh, it just kind of makes me a little depressed. So I love the sun.
I hear you. It is. I'm 5 generations California, and I've been up here 15 years, and I still struggle. And the struggle is March and April.
Yeah.
So, but the summers are I think the best in the country. So that's why people live here. Is just because it's just amazing up here in the summertime.
Yeah, I believe it. So tell me, how'd you get into the food business? I was reading that you were at Xerox, you worked in maybe the medical field, maybe medical sales, and then you got into coffee bean?
Yeah, I was sort of I hadn't found my calling. I think I was maybe in my early 30s, and I was working in. I had found my calling like in marketing, working for a dietary supplement startup in the Bay Area, and it was wild success and a lot of fun. But I really didn't enjoy the industry. Um, and or the product. It wasn't a lot of passion there, and so we were looking to move out of the Bay Area, my wife and I, and found an opportunity to lead marketing at a coffee company called Coffee Bean International in Portland,
Mhm.
and I just fell in love. I mean, I just loved the product. I loved. Um, the coffee is a really cool category. The origin stories, the geography and climate, the impact those things have on flavor, the farming element. It's an agricultural product, and then there's a lot that happens after it leaves origin, and you got to be. It has to be roasted correctly. It has to be served correctly by the barista, and so there's. It was just such a really interesting, we'll call it, value chain. And so that I fell in love with, I think, the food business and food service when I was running marketing and doing a lot of product work in coffee.
When you got into working with Coffee Bean, you jumped into marketing. Is that what you went to school for? Was marketing?
Yeah, not initially. I think I went to business school to kind of get on track. Like I think,
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of kids do that because they know what they want to do and they want to advance their career. And then there's the rest of us who didn't really have a sharp vision for what we wanted to do.
Mhm.
And so for me, it was an opportunity to kind of take a time out and really get educated on what my options were. And then in that process, it was my second year of business school where I kind of think, well, maybe I'm not a finance guy. Maybe I'm more creative and love brands and communications and product innovation. And so so it didn't hit me until really late in my second year of business school where I figured, okay, this is fun. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I when I went to Chapman, I got a degree in business. I went in, I was like, I don't really know what I wanted to do. Maybe I was like, I'll be a financial advisor or something. But my dad got me into the food business and been here now for 9 years, and it's been a good run. But I figured, yeah, kind of take maybe a similar approach, be more general, and then kind of become more focused as time goes on. And it served me well so far. As uh, as someone with marketing in the food business, working for Coffee Bean, and you've had other positions as well, working within marketing. When you look at a brand, what are some of the first things that you try to tackle and try to help on the marketing side?
Yeah. So, well, I look first at like, are we connect, like, who's our consumer and are we connecting with that consumer? Are we relevant? Or are we kind of yesterday's news? Um, I think that's important. So that's been something I've done at pretty much every stop on my career. I spent 10 years at Tillamook, um, the
Yeah.
the dairy company here in Oregon, and that was an awesome opportunity to work on what was already an amazing brand, but not really well known outside of the Northwest. And so we used that um, time before we did the national expansion program for Tillamook. We went in and updated the brand, the identity, real sharp definition on the consumer, and we were kind of reckless with it. And it felt like we were doing open heart surgery on this company that had been around for over 100 years, um, and made some bold choices there. And that was really super gratifying work. That's been a wild success, and I've done that type of work at Oregon Fruit here too. I've been at the Oregon Fruit Company, and we also did a similar process of just sort of making sure that we're putting our best foot forward in how we present ourselves.
So you mentioned, going into Tillamook and even now here at Oregon Fruit being kind of, I think the word you used was reckless. What does that mean?
Yeah. So anytime you're messing with brand, there you can kind of think of it as a, like in terms of a house. So
Okay.
you can put a new coat of paint, and shuffle the furniture around. You can move some walls and remodel, um, or you can just tear it down and rebuild. And so, and then and when working with the agency, you kind of got to get everyone on the team aligned on where are you on that spectrum. And I would encourage folks to, of course, do some design work that you're comfortable with on that spectrum, but then also ask for something where you're taking bolder choices, um, and then because you can always pull back from there, but you want to explore the edge of what you want to get to, that uncomfortable place where you're really evolving the brand. Um, because most of the time, the mistake that I see um, companies make is by not being bold enough in the evolution and being too conservative with how they're kind of moving the brand forward. These projects where you're doing a rebrand, you shouldn't be doing this very often.
Mhm.
It's not something that, maybe a touch up every 5-7 years, but it shouldn't be like a whole, okay, let's just re-envision what this thing should look like. So it has to last a while. And so because it had been so long since Tillamook had touched their identity, we felt like we could be reckless, like we could go and, hey, let's build this thing for the next 25-30 years. Um, but let's make up for lost time. It's way outdated. Um,
In working at Tillamook, really pushing the limits, being reckless. What did maybe any examples that you have from at your time there? What that looked like?
yeah, so it wasn't just the we did the full rebrand. We took over. I'm gonna get the number wrong. Close to 300 SKUs and redesigned all of them. Um, it was painful. It took a long time. It was expensive. But the impact on the shelf was amazing. And I always think of
Mhm.
the ice cream category where we were trying to go in and get one door of distribution across the country. And the impact of the new design, with every flavor having its own color, which at the time was pretty crazy. Every other brand in the shelf was monochromatic. So going in with this really checkered design, I think we had 24 different colors in play. But the impact when you got a full door distribution was awesome. It was like a billboard for the brand. In every grocery store, we got that distribution. That's one example. I also think, like, just in innovation and all the product work that I've done, it's good to take chances.
Mhm.
And because it's one of the, and it's been stated many times, like, you're going to fail on product a lot. But when you take big swings, you can and try to, like, break category conventions, as they say. um, you can really create a movement in a category and have a lot of success.
It's interesting. Like when I think of Tillamook, right? If I go to the grocery store, you have your store brand. Maybe you got Sargento, maybe you have some other brands in there. But like when you get Tillamook, the perceived value that I have, I can only speak from my own experience. In my mind, I'm like, this is a premium product that I'm buying. It's almost like this is like a treasured product to have in my kitchen or in my refrigerator, whether it's the ice cream or it's the cheeses. And it's fascinating that marketing can do that. What has the marketing efforts of Tillamook and yourself done to influence my brain, where I don't know if you had commercials, but in my brain, I'm thinking this is something, it's going to be creamier. It's going to be maybe just a better bite. It's whatever it may be, I definitely have that perception of Tillamook being here in Southern California. And I'm sure over time you spread that across the whole country too at your time there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear you say that because there's a lot of tension on the idea of premium and the other idea that tugs at premium, which is scale or accessibility, right?
Yeah.
And so the classic positioning of a premium accessible product is kind of what we were aspiring to when we did that design. And we felt, and I felt like we were making a lot of choices that kind of made the product less premium,
Hmm.
in order to have more of a mass appeal. And it was painful for me. And I remember it because, like one example is like you can't in a super premium product, like you used to be able to put like a ton of information on the front panel. Um, and the designers convinced me that like those days are over and less is more. And this allows for a more elegant design. Um, and and they were right. But I remember feeling like during the design process that it really looked mass. It really looked like, gosh, you're not going to tell them all this good stuff about the product. You picture like a can of Coke. I mean, it's just the logo and
Hmm.
versus listing these attributes. And so, but that I think that's probably, I'm guessing, what you're reacting to when you see that brand is that it's very simple,
Hmm.
yet kind of kind of works together on the shelf.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's some sort of perceived value to it. So at your time at Tillamook, you do a rebrand. You look at the 300 SKUs you have. It's a painful process. You go through, you change all of them. Um, once you kind of, as you're going through this process, and once you kind of complete that, are there metrics that you put in place or controls that you put in place on the marketing side to be able to track? Well, did this work?
Yeah, you measuring lift on packaging design. It was tricky. Like it did not. I would say like when we looked at just same store sales equivalent metrics, it did not work. It took at least a year to to make any to say like, hey, that was a good decision from looking at our base business. Where it really made an impact immediately was on our own presentation as we were trying to get in distribution, going in and meeting with Kroger and walking them through like kind of who we were and what we would look like on their shelf. That presentation was so much better than the one we had before the design. And I do think that the design helped us get new distribution.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you go from Tillamook to Oregon Fruit, what are some of the things that you took from Tillamook into Oregon Fruit?
Yeah, well, I think lots. um, I think of um, the culture of winning that we created at Tillamook, that I'm trying to create at Oregon Fruit. Um, and an environment where change is not pushed away, but maybe encouraged. Um, and giving folks um, runway and permission to make mistakes as long as we're going for it. Um, and um, and I think just a little like adopting I've had a kind of a similar offense that we've been running where we're going to lead with insights, um,
Mhm.
and we're going to invest disproportionately on that. We're going to come up with like killer creative that connects with our audience, um, and then we're just going to focus on growth and distribution expansion. So those kind of three things that I know work is what we're kind of running at Oregon Fruit. So it's kind of similar growth story. It is a B2B proposition, which is what's different. but we're kind of treating it like we're treating this food service brand that we're growing like it's a consumer brand.
Interesting. And why are you taking that strategy to treat it like a consumer brand?
Well, I think it's such a big audience, and
Hmm.
um, and it's a competitive marketplace, and we're talking about 18 million food service workers that are interacting with this brand, and it's a more than large enough ecosystem for us to be thinking critically about how we show up in that back of house environment, how we show up behind the counter, and are we premium, and are we additive to the operator's brand proposition. Um,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, that's kind of how we think about it. And we're not the only ones doing that. I think that's evolving. I think B2B is becoming more like B2C in terms of brand development.
Yeah, I've seen that for sure. I mean, being in I think just being on the West Coast in general, Washington, Oregon, California, there's a lot of brands. I think New York probably has some similar brands that kind of have a similar type mentality, leave it with that consumer product kind of thought. Because in food service, it's becoming more prevalent. Hey, if I'm a large plant based burger company, maybe I can get on the menu, be on a commercial somewhere, and help build my brand in food service, but then retail as well. It's kind of backwards.
Exactly. Yeah, and it could be. Yeah, it could spill into retail, um, but we start in food service, and yeah, I think. And when I was at Tillamook, they had and it wasn't. I mean, just from being around for like 110 years, that brand is menu mentioned like all over the West
Mhm.
Coast. And it wasn't. I don't think it was like a strategy. I think it just sort of happened over time because it was the best cheese and everyone kind of knew
Yep.
that.
There's certain brands, Tillamook being one of them. If I put that on a menu, I can list that I have cheese on a burger. Anybody can do that. But if I put this as Tillamook cheese on this burger, maybe I can charge 50 cents more, or maybe I can charge $1 more, make an additional profit because that brand is strong. Now, I'm going to pay a little bit more, but for the markup that I can gain from having that brand on there, sometimes, it's a better proposition for the operator.
Exactly, and that's the same. I think it's the same proposition for Oregon fruit, potentially even more so because there's so much fruited beverage innovation happening in food service right now. You think about coffee, the coffee channel, QSR, and how operators do that well is important to Gen Z, and I would say younger millennials specifically. And so that's the approach that we're taking with Oregon fruit is put Oregon fruit on the menu.
If you look at the total addressable market in food service for Oregon fruit, I know you mentioned leading with insights. Um, of what's available out there today, do you think you can? Are you looking to carve into what's available, or are you looking to? Because Oregon fruit, the products you have are very unique. They're innovative, right? Are you looking to carve out share that it's educating a consumer, maybe introducing a whole new category to them?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of like, I mean, when I was in coffee, Americans were already drinking tons of coffee.
Hmm.
And then Stumptown, Intelligentsia, and Counterculture were these third wave coffee brands that kind of introduced Americans to coffee on a whole nother level,
Hmm.
and it was crafted. Um, I think we can do the same thing with lemonade, agua fresca, milkshakes, all these beverages that rely almost exclusively on the quality of the fruit to drive flavor, mouthfeel, um, texture, otherwise. And so I think it's crafted beverage is what we're
Hmm.
trying to create in, and it's a groundswell. I mean, this is happening, and we can kind of be a part of the movement and maybe steer it in certain directions as operators are trying to figure out, how to attract this audience.
What about changing gears for a second? Running this company, Oregon Fruits, as a CEO with a marketing background. Sometimes with CEOs, you might see like a finance background. You see a lot of that. Sometimes you'll see some salespeople out there, but having a marketing background is a unique perspective on within a business. How do you feel that gives you an advantage within your company to help drive that growth?
Yeah, I've always thought that, the brand management practice at a company like Procter and Gamble or General Mills, these kind of big food companies, I've always felt that kind of that role um, is like the most important role for a brand. Um, and that's and or like that because you're kind of you're grappling. You get really good at grappling with the value proposition of the product and the brand, um, innovation as a growth driver. You get really comfortable with talking about distribution. You understand margin, your competitive set, and so like I've always felt my bias has been that, well, that's the most important thing. What other
Yeah.
training would prepare a CEO? And so I do have a pretty strong background in finance, to kind of pair with my experience in marketing. So that has been part of my I would say kind of trajectory in my career as well.
Yeah.
Being able to go into the boardroom and speak fluently about the financial side of the business. So that's critical, but I do think it's an advantage to be able to understand like the forward focused kind of commercial side of the business and and lead the business through that lens. I will say that since I've been CEO, I probably spend less time on that and more time on those other areas of the business, which surprised me honestly. But I spend more time in operations and finance than I do with marketing and sales.
Isn't that interesting? I've definitely in our industry, I've seen CEOs with like operations and product backgrounds as well. Kind of drilling down on that a little bit more. What does your day to day look like? You've got your background. You have a lot of marketing. You have finance, but you're mentioning, hey, I'm in operations as well. But what is your like on a typical week? What does the job of a CEO look like?
Yeah, I mean, it changes week to week. I'll tell you this week, we're leading up to a product launch here on October 1st. So I've been in sales mode. This week I've had 3 sales appointments, kind of top to top type of conversations that I've been able to get through my network with distributors.
Hmm.
Um, I've had a couple interviews, with media. I've probably spent the other hours like we had a planning session today with the team, kind of lining up our initiatives for Q4, and putting some prep into that. And then we had a wargaming session with the sales team and so I attended the first half of that, and tried to get the team fired up about what we're about to embark on. So that kind of gives you a snapshot of what the week is like.
Are you familiar with a BHAG, like a big, hairy, audacious goal?
Absolutely.
You know, I know you've talked a little bit about kind of where you're taking this brand. You've got a new product launch upcoming. What is that big pie in the sky, that BHAG that you want to achieve during your time at Oregon Fruit?
Yeah, so we want to be sort of well, our vision statement is to be the leading fruit for beverage brand in the United States.
Hmm.
And the way we kind of think about that is how many beverages are we responsible for? And so we kind of talk about internally about if we can get to 500 million beverages uh, per year, that's our goal. And that crosses um, both of our key channels, which so we have a food service business, and then we also have a business where we're supplying fruit to beverage manufacturers.
Mm.
So it kind of neatly spans both of our growth channels. So, for instance, like if you've ever had a fruited beer, um, there's a
Hmm.
good chance the fruit came from Oregon fruit, and that's a point of pride for the organization. And and so we talk a lot about our brewery partners, our cidery partners, in addition to all the restaurants that we're working with to do beverage programs.
Incredible. And what about if you can look back on your career here in the food industry? If you can go back to that time you were graduating as a duck, Oregon duck, till now, what advice would you give your youngest self?
Ah, um, yeah, I think I'm pausing. I think the becoming indispensable at the company, whatever company you work at, is critical. And the way that I did that was to just know the category inside and out, as if I were an entrepreneur that just spent my life savings on this venture. So I think having that mentality, especially, um, I think that carries into food service. I've certainly carries into like uh, folks that are running food manufacturing businesses. You got to know the neighborhood, and that means like where the consumers at and what are they drinking or eating right now, and is that a persistent trend, or is that something that's going to be fade next year? And understanding the underpinnings of that and going deep on that. And then
Mhm.
also like what's your source of volume? Are you going to be like, and you asked me that, Nick, a few minutes ago, is like, are you stealing share, or are you growing by introducing something new and introducing a new behavior, and getting really crisp on that, um, and and including the basics like what's the size of the market and what's your fair share. I'm always surprised when I talk to entrepreneurs here locally, or just other companies that are in these spaces, and they're so focused on winning, but they haven't done the fairly simple work of just looking up and saying like, is this a how big is this pond that we're fishing in, and do we have a shot at carving
Yeah.
out a decent share? I think those kind of like fundamentals of knowing your neighborhood are important.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Joe, I want to say thank you so much for taking time to come on and share your story. And I want to wish you nothing but incredible success with Oregon fruit. As I mentioned, I've tried the products and they're fantastic. I mean, I love them. It does really. I like what you said about it's a craft beverage. When you apply your products into it, and it fits perfectly too. I know the packaging, like within a bar or a food service operation. So, but thank you for just coming on and sharing. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for looking me up.
Yeah, you're welcome.